So, picture this. We're at the Continental Hotel in Cairo. A super wealthy British aristocrat is in his bed, absolutely racked by this raging fever. Every breath is a struggle. He's dying. And then, at exactly 1:55 in the morning, he takes his last breath. In that very same instant, poof, the entire city of Cairo is plunged into total, complete darkness. Everything just goes silent. And if that wasn't weird enough, thousands of miles away, back on his estate in England, his little dog, Susie, suddenly lets out this one long, chilling howl, and then just falls over, dead. So, what on earth could connect all these bizarre, terrifying events? Well, this inscription. The warning, supposedly found at the entrance to a tomb this lord had opened just a few months before, the tomb of King Tutankhamun. To really understand the so-called curse, you have to go back to the beginning. We need to meet the two men who stumbled upon what is, without a doubt, the greatest archaeological find in all of human history. On one side, you've got Howard Carter. Now, he's not some fancy academic. He's the son of a painter, but he is tenacious, and he's about to lose all his funding. On the other side is his money man, Lord Carnarvon, who was just, getting sick of pouring money into Egyptian sand for 15 years. This was it. This was their last chance. So, November 4th, 1922, a water boy trips on something. It's a single step cut right into the bedrock. Can you imagine the excitement? By the next day, they've uncovered a whole staircase leading down to a sealed door. And then, finally, on November 26th, they break through a second door. This was really it. So Carter makes his tiny hole in the door. He holds a candle up to peer inside, and this rush of hot air comes out, making the flame flicker like crazy. Behind him, Lord Carnarvon just can't take it anymore, and he asks that now famous question, "Can you see anything?" And Carter, just completely stunned, can only manage to whisper, "Yes, wonderful things." And what he was seeing was just beyond belief. Almost 5,400 objects sitting there completely untouched for over 3,000 years. A solid gold death mask weighing 10 kilos, coffins of pure gold. There was even a dagger that was forged from the metal of a meteorite. It was the discovery of a lifetime. But as news of this incredible treasure flashed all around the globe, something else began to spread with it. A dark legend, a story of a king's revenge from beyond the grave. And the first omen? Well, it appeared almost right away. Okay, so the story goes that Howard Carter had this little pet canary he brought with him. One day, he comes back to his house and finds a cobra, the sacred symbol of the Pharaohs, inside the birdcage, having eaten his canary. Now, his local Egyptian workers, they were terrified. They saw it as a crystal-clear warning. The spirit of the king was angry. And then, the deaths began. They started to pile up, and the media just went into a frenzy. First, Lord Carnarvon dies from that infected mosquito bite. Then an American financier who visited the tomb dies from a fever. Then a radiologist who x-rayed the mummy just drops dead. One after another, people connected to the tomb started dying in weird ways, and the newspapers around the world went absolutely wild. Within just 6 years, the papers were reporting this shocking total. 22 people, all of them somehow linked to the opening of that tomb, were now dead. The curse of the pharaoh seemed totally, undeniably real. But here's the one detail, the one that seemed to just silence all the skeptics. Remember Lord Carnarvon died from an insect bite on his left cheek? Well, when doctors later performed an autopsy on Tutankhamun's mummy, they found a lesion on the mummy's left cheek, in the exact same spot. I mean, it was an impossible, chilling coincidence. So, a 3,000-year-old pharaoh reaching out from the great beyond to get his revenge. It's a fantastic, absolutely terrifying story that captured the world's imagination. But how much of it is actually true? Let's start with the heart of the whole legend, right? The very source of the curse. That terrifying warning carved at the entrance. The truth? It was a complete fake, a fabrication. It never, ever existed. Years later, it came out that a journalist who was just desperate for a good story made it up on the spot. And the archaeology team, who were probably pretty amused by it all, they never bothered to correct him. And right there, from that one moment of silence, the world's most famous curse was born. And once you know that, the other proofs just fall apart so easily. That mysterious citywide blackout? Yeah, power cuts were a daily thing in 1920s Cairo. The dog dying at the exact same second?
When you account for the time difference between Egypt and England, it actually died hours later. And all those healthy people suddenly dropping dead, this was an era before penicillin. A simple infection from an insect bite was a potential death sentence.
And you know what? The science completely backs this up. In 2002, the British Medical Journal actually looked into it. They tracked 25 people who were there when the tomb was opened and compared them to a similar group who weren't. The result? The cursed group lived to an average age of 70. The uncursed group lived to 75. Statistically speaking, there was absolutely no difference. So, with all the supernatural evidence totally debunked, the most powerful argument against this curse is also the most simple and obvious one. Just think about it for a second. Logically, if the Pharaoh's curse was real, the people who were most exposed to his wrath, the ones who first broke into his eternal resting place and, handled his actual body, they should have been the first to die, right? Well, Lord Carnarvon's own daughter, Lady Evelyn, was one of the very first people inside that tomb. She lived to be 78. The doctor who performed the autopsy on the mummy, he lived to the ripe old age of 87. The prime targets of the curse ended up living long, full lives. And what about our main character, the man who was public enemy number one for the pharaoh? Howard Carter, the guy who physically broke the seal and disturbed the king's rest. He lived for another 16 years, dying at 64. Whenever reporters would ask him about the curse, he had a very simple, very consistent reply: "I am still alive." In the end, there's this really beautiful irony to the whole story. The ancient Egyptians believed you only truly die when your name is spoken for the very last time. And Tutankhamun, he was a forgotten boy king. His successors literally tried to erase him from history. By finding his tomb, Howard Carter didn't unleash a curse. He made sure that 3,000 years later, the entire world would know his name. He didn't bring death, he gave King Tutankhamun immortality.